An ordinary evening turned into a turning point that could no longer be ignored. One innocent question, and a crack ran through the familiar rhythm of their life. She watched the movie, but her thoughts were elsewhere. He smiled, but felt a quiet unease growing beneath his skin. Words, spoken as if in jest, began to spark consequences far too real. What started as an attempt to reignite their connection became a blaze that consumed everything they had spent years building. He agreed. For her. For them. For the chance. But while he stepped forward, she stepped sideways. When another woman entered the picture, he didn't see excitement, he saw distance. And when she asked for more, he realized this wasn't a search for intimacy anymore. It was an escape. He didn't yell, didn't blame. He simply began to see things clearly. And when it came time to choose, stay in the shadow of someone else's desires or walk into his own truth, he chose himself. Because love doesn't always die from betrayal. Sometimes it fades when it's no longer mutual. Hello, my friend. I'm so glad you stopped by my channel. If you're here for the first time, don't forget to subscribe and share this video with your friends or family. It really helps my channel a lot. Please tell me in which city or country you watched this video. I value every one of your comments. So let's get started. Ethan lounged low on the couch, the half-eaten bowl of popcorn in his lap, nearly forgotten. Camille sat just behind him, legs curled beneath her, eyes fixed on the screen. But it was obvious her thoughts had drifted far from the movie they'd chosen for the evening. What had begun with shared laughter and playful commentary had faded into sporadic conversation as the film wore on. These kinds of nights, uncomplicated, slow-paced, just the two of them, were ones they both held dear. But then Camille said something that pulled Ethan sharply out of his comfort. "Do you ever think about being with other people?" she asked, her voice casual. "Like, not seriously. I mean, maybe a threesome or swapping partners or something. I'm not saying I want that. It's just kind of a weird thought, right?" Her tone was breezy, as if she were tossing a joke into the room to fill the quiet. Ethan, hand buried absent-mindedly in the popcorn, turned toward her with a puzzled expression. He let out a soft laugh, though it felt more like a reflex than amusement. Camille didn't usually bring up things like this. "I guess it's normal to have random thoughts now and then," he said, trying to match her tone, to keep things light. The conversation quickly drifted elsewhere, but her words didn't leave him. They clung to his mind, echoing. After nearly a decade with Camille, he usually had a read on what she was thinking, but this comment didn't feel familiar. Her tone had been weightless, but the idea itself landed heavy in his chest. Even if it was meant as a joke, the suggestion unsettled him. As the film dragged toward its conclusion, Ethan kept his eyes on the screen, but none of the dialogue registered. Was she bored with him? Or was it just a random musing tossed out during a dull movie? There wasn't any real indication she was dissatisfied. Camille had always been warm, steady, loving. And yet, her comment had unearthed a question he hadn't thought to ask before. When the credits finally rolled, Camille turned off the television and said she was going to bed, blaming tiredness. Ethan remained on the couch, staring at the darkened screen, his thoughts spinning. He needed to understand what she meant, but the idea of hearing the truth made him uneasy. "I'll talk to her tomorrow," he promised himself. As he finally got up and walked toward the bedroom, her words repeated in his head, not as a joke, but as a quiet signal that maybe things weren't as simple as he'd believed. The room went dark, but the darkness offered no peace. By morning, Ethan was up earlier than usual. As coffee brewed, he stood motionless, replaying the night before in his head. He knew the topic couldn't be left untouched, but he wasn't sure how to approach it without creating tension. He didn't want to accuse or interrogate, but he also couldn't let it slide. He stared into the curling steam rising from his mug, hoping it might clear his mind. When Camille walked into the kitchen, his heart picked up pace. But he knew this was a moment that needed honesty. "About what you said last night," he said softly, almost cautiously. Camille froze for a second while reaching for the fridge. Her posture changed, just slightly, but enough for him to notice. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone light, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of discomfort. Ethan drew in a breath. "I've been thinking about it. Was it something random you said? Or do you feel like something isn't right between us?" He watched her closely, hoping her body language might reveal what her words couldn't. Camille shut the fridge and leaned back against the counter, folding her arms, not out of anger, but more like she was bracing herself. "It wasn't meant to upset you," she said. "It just kind of slipped out." Then, more quietly, she added, "But maybe that's a sign we need to talk, really talk, about where we're at." Her gaze dropped. "I do love our life together. I really do. But sometimes it feels like we're stuck on a loop. It's not your fault. It's not even really ours. It's just me." Ethan let the silence stretch, letting her words sink in. Camille wasn't usually this open. She was the steady one, the one who always seemed sure. But now, that confidence had cracked just a little. "So you're feeling unsatisfied?" he asked, careful not to sound accusing. "I wouldn't call it that," she replied slowly. "It's more like I miss the excitement, the feeling of something new. I don't want to change anything drastic. I'm not trying to hurt you. It's just those thoughts pop into my head now and then. Not because I'd ever act on them, but because they shake up the routine." Ethan felt a dull ache in his chest, but surprisingly, there was also a strange sense of relief. As painful as it was to hear, there was honesty in her words, and that honesty mattered. "I think I understand," he said, and even he was surprised by the steadiness in his voice. "Everyone wonders now and then if something's missing." He hesitated, then asked, "If I had those kinds of thoughts, about being with someone else, how would that make you feel?" Camille took a moment before replying, choosing her words with care. "If I'm being honest, I'd probably feel threatened, maybe insecure, but I'd still want to know. It would be harder if you kept it to yourself." "I don't know, Ethan. Everything feels like a mess right now," Camille said quietly, her voice laced with honesty. "I just needed to speak the truth, because you're the only person I genuinely trust." Ethan gave her a slight nod, the kind that said more through his eyes than any overt movement. What she'd said wasn't easy to hear, but he appreciated her openness. Still, it felt like something was missing, like she'd opened a door just enough to peek out, without stepping through. Careful not to push too hard, Ethan took a measured risk. "This seems to be weighing on you, and on us. Maybe instead of dancing around it, we should face it head on. I'm not talking about throwing everything off balance, just being honest together. Facing it side by side." Camille's expression shifted, a complex mix of relief, surprise, and a shadow of doubt. "What do you mean exactly?" she asked, barely above a whisper, as the silence stretched between them. Ethan's voice remained steady, gentle. "I want to really understand you. But more than that, I want this to bring us closer, not drive a wedge between us. You matter to me more than anything. And if there's something creating distance, I'd rather deal with it than pretend it's not there." When he suggested the idea of involving someone else, he treaded carefully, choosing his words with intention. "Maybe we could bring in a new energy, someone familiar, maybe one of your friends, someone who'd make the idea feel safe and not overwhelming." Camille's eyes widened, caught off guard. Then she gave a small, uncertain laugh. "That's definitely not where I thought this was going," she said. "Honestly, I was imagining something entirely different." She hesitated before continuing. "I was thinking, maybe a man. Something totally outside the framework of what you just proposed." Her confession threw Ethan for a moment. He raised an eyebrow but kept his tone calm and curious. "Is that what you're really thinking about?" he asked, not accusatory, just genuinely seeking clarity. Camille let out a slow breath, as if releasing something she'd held inside too long. "Yes. I'm not obsessed with the idea, but it's come to mind more than a few times. Ethan sat in silence, absorbing her words. He didn't want to shut her down or create tension. After a pause, he nodded slowly. All right, then let's take this one step at a time. We'll start with your suggestion. Bring in a friend you trust. If that goes well, we can take the next step. Your step. Camille's face lit up, her grin widening with excitement. Really? Yes, absolutely. Yes. Her enthusiasm took him by surprise. Part of him wanted to ask what made her so sure, but he decided not to risk shifting the mood. Okay, he said with a small, cautious smile. So, who do you have in mind? Camille immediately reached for her phone, scrolling through contacts. She needed someone who wouldn't overthink, someone who'd understand without judgment. After a few seconds of indecision, she landed on a name: Letitia. Warm, confident, and perceptive. She hit dial. Hey, Letitia. I've got kind of an unusual favor to ask you. And with that, the evening was set in motion. Later, their house was wrapped in a tense, expectant calm. Right on schedule, Letitia showed up, radiating her usual charm and ease, instantly softening the thick atmosphere like sunshine breaking through cloud cover. Camille greeted her with a nervous laugh, trying to mask the churn of emotions underneath. Ethan kept his expression composed, though inside, he was just as unsettled. Letitia walked in like she belonged there, tossed her bag on the couch, and flopped down with a relaxed smile. So, she teased, who cooked up this wild little idea? Camille and Ethan exchanged a brief look before Camille replied, I guess we both did. We just needed to shake things up. Break the routine. Her voice hinted more at a need for reassurance than firm conviction. The conversation wandered to lighter topics, old memories, random stories, anything to keep the tension from taking over. Letitia, ever the social alchemist, steered things smoothly, keeping the vibe playful while also picking up on the subtleties in the room. Her jokes were casual, but her gaze was observant. Wine flowed, laughter surfaced in short bursts, but beneath it all ran a current of quiet anticipation. Eventually, Letitia leaned forward, her tone softening, more sincere. All right, let's stop pretending this is just a wine night. I love you both, and I'm here because I trust you, and I support whatever you're exploring. But this only works if everyone's truly in. So, is this what you both want? Her question lingered in the air like mist. Camille was the first to respond, her tone steady and sure. Yes, I want this. I really do. Ethan followed a moment later, his voice calm but thoughtful. Yeah, we're ready. Even as he said it, something stirred within him, a quiet uncertainty. Not about Camille, not about Letitia, but about where this path might lead them and what it could change. The moments that followed were filled with tentative smiles, subtle gestures, and a shared effort to ease the tension. They were all trying, to be honest, to stay open, to move forward together, and for now, that was enough. Ethan studied the interaction between Camille and Letitia, attempting to interpret the nuanced expressions flickering across his wife's face. Camille exuded a mixture of anticipation and anxiety, while Letitia, perpetually poised, subtly guided the atmosphere, her calm presence smoothing over the discomfort that might have otherwise emerged. Yet, as the evening progressed, something unexpected began to take shape in Ethan's mind. Though Camille seemed fully engaged, he started to feel detached, as if he were merely witnessing a private moment rather than participating in it. What was meant to draw them closer had begun, for Ethan, to reveal something he hadn't anticipated. With every passing moment, it felt less like an intimate connection and more like the unveiling of a truth he hadn't been prepared to confront. As the night wound down, Letitia, ever perceptive, gently brought things to a close. That's probably enough for tonight, she said softly. Take some time to process everything. I'm grateful you included me. She stood, embraced Camille warmly, and gave Ethan a thoughtful, almost sympathetic smile before slipping out. When the door closed and quiet filled the room, Camille turned toward him, her face lit with hope, though tempered with uncertainty. "So, what did you think?" she asked, her voice laced with anticipation. Ethan didn't reply immediately. He remained still, staring at her, a strange cocktail of clarity and confusion washing over him. In that stillness, something within him surfaced. This whole experience had dredged up questions he hadn't realized were buried. Eventually, he sank onto the couch, leaning forward, elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on some indistinct point across the room. Camille remained where she was, a few feet away, the eagerness in her gaze now edged with unease. Her question still lingered between them, unanswered. He didn't even know how to begin. The silence thickened, growing heavier with each second, more suffocating than any words they might have exchanged. Finally, he stood, ran a hand along the back of his neck, and let out a breath. "I don't know, Camille. I'm trying to understand it." His tone was calm but carried weight, and the honesty in it made Camille tense. "You don't know what to think?" she asked, arms folding across her chest defensively. "What does that mean? Isn't this what we agreed on?" Ethan began to pace, wrestling with thoughts that wouldn't settle into coherence. He knew he owed her the truth, but he also didn't want to cause unnecessary pain. "I hoped this would bring us back together, that maybe it could help us reconnect. I really thought it might shift something for us, but what I actually felt, it surprised me." Camille's arms drew tighter around herself, as if bracing for a blow. "What did you feel then?" she asked, barely above a whisper. He stopped pacing and looked directly at her. "I felt like you were excited by the experience, not by what it meant for us. Don't get me wrong, I know you were looking forward to it. But it felt like your energy was going into what you wanted from it, not what we could find in it together." The words landed hard. Camille parted her lips as if to speak, but then hesitated, drawing in a slow, shaky breath before turning her gaze aside. "I didn't realize you saw it that way," she said quietly. "For me, it was supposed to shake us out of the routine, something thrilling we could share." Ethan's voice grew more pointed, touched by frustration. "But I didn't feel that thrill. I spent the whole night trying to find a way to connect with you. And all I could see was you, completely lit up, while I was fading into the background. It was like I wasn't even there. That hurt, Camille." She didn't respond right away, the gravity of his words sinking in. When she did speak, her voice was soft and remorseful. "I never meant for you to feel that way. I wanted something that would wake us up, make us feel alive again." Ethan dragged a hand down his face, visibly worn. He understood what she'd tried to do, but that didn't change the fact that he felt left behind. "I know you had good intentions, Camille. I get that. But now I need to ask, was this really about the two of us? Or is this part of something you're exploring on your own?" His question hovered in the silence, heavier than anything they'd said so far. Camille blinked, momentarily thrown. Her eyes searched his face, as though trying to understand the depth of what he was asking. "I want this to be about us. Truly I do," she said, her voice cracking under the weight of emotion. "But maybe I didn't think it through the way you're thinking about it now." Ethan nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. "Maybe that's the core of it. Maybe we're approaching this from completely different directions. And honestly, I'm not sure this is something we can work through together. At least not yet." His words sent a chill through Camille. "What are you saying?" she asked, voice trembling. "Are you saying this is the end?" Her eyes shimmered, on the verge of tears. Ethan hesitated, carefully choosing what to say next. He knew the weight his response would carry. "I'm not saying I'm walking away, but I am saying we can't keep going like this. I need time, Camille. I need space to figure out what all of this really means for me. Because right now, I feel completely unmoored." And I think you do too. Camille remained motionless, his words echoing inside her. Part of her wanted to argue, to push back, to reject what he was saying. But deep down, she recognized the truth in it. What was meant to be healing had instead exposed the growing gap between them, and now they had to face just how far they'd drifted apart. A thick, oppressive quiet settled between them, heavy with the words they hadn't dared speak. Ethan didn't move, his eyes locked on Camille, though his mind churned with tangled thoughts. There were still truths lingering in the shadows, but he was trying to piece things together before daring another step. Their conversation had stalled, hitting an impasse neither of them knew how to break. He wasn't sure anymore if he wanted to break it, or even if he could. Camille was the one who finally shattered the stillness. Her voice was calm, but beneath it simmered something urgent. Ethan, are you still going to stand by what you promised? You said that if things worked out with Letitia, I'd get to decide what came next, and I told you, I want to invite another man. Her words struck like a sudden jolt, catching Ethan unprepared. He blinked, stunned. His eyes searched hers, looking for any hint of mockery or manipulation, but there was none. Only a quiet, unshaken determination. No mischief, no disguise. Just a firm reminder of what she believed she was owed. That request snapped something into clarity for him. The woman he had spent the last 7 years with suddenly felt like someone else. Camille, are you being serious? His voice came low, each syllable landing with weight. Without thinking, he stepped backward, as if the distance would help him process what he was hearing. You really want to go through with this? After everything we just talked about? Her gaze didn't waver. You made a promise, Ethan. You said we'd be honest about our desires, and this is part of mine. I don't understand why it's so hard for you to accept that. He shook his head, disbelief etched into every line of his face. It's not that I don't get it, Camille. It's what it represents. I thought we were trying to rebuild something between us. I thought this was about finding our way back. But right now, the way you're insisting on this, it feels like it's only about you. Like I'm no longer part of what matters. Camille opened her mouth, ready to push back, but he raised a hand to stop her. He needed to speak before the courage slipped away. That night with Letitia, it showed me a lot. The biggest thing? I love you, but we've changed. We're not who we were when we got married. And I think, deep down, you feel that too. Tears welled in Camille's eyes, though she held herself together. So that's it? You're ending everything because I wanted something different? He moved closer, hands unsteady, the tremble giving away everything he was trying to hold in. No, not just because of that. It's everything this week has shown us. I've tried to close the distance between us, Camille. But what you're asking, it shows just how wide the gap has become. And I'm not sure it's a gap we can cross anymore. This isn't about a broken promise. It's about how far apart we've grown. She couldn't hold the tears back now. Ethan, please don't do this. I know I haven't been perfect. I know I've asked a lot. But please, don't give up on us. He looked at her, long and hard, every unspoken feeling sitting between them like a wall. I never wanted to lose you. But I think we've already lost each other. A long time ago. And if we keep pretending, keep trying to salvage something that's no longer there, all we're going to do is hurt each other more. He turned, snatched his keys off the counter, and headed for the door. Just before stepping out, he paused, looking back at her one final time. I hope you find what you're searching for, but I can't be part of it anymore. And then he was gone, leaving Camille standing there, her cheeks streaked with tears, staring at the empty space he had just left behind. Ethan sat in the armchair a few moments longer, weighed down by sorrow and fatigue. He knew he couldn't stay, not without making it worse. Remaining would only prolong the ache, keep them circling the same unresolved pain. Everything that needed saying had already been said. The raw, unvarnished truth now lay between them. He slowly stood, eyes avoiding Camille's, and made his way toward the door. Her gaze followed him, hollow and stunned, her body frozen. "You're really leaving?" she whispered, barely loud enough to hear. He stopped, hand resting on the knob, not turning to face her. "I need space, Camille. Time to think. And I think you do too." She wanted to stop him, to reach for him and ask him to stay, but something in his voice told her it was too late. There was no anger in his tone, just a quiet finality that cut deeper than any shout could. The sound of the door closing echoed like a thunderclap in the silence that followed. Camille remained on the couch, unmoving, the silence more deafening now than it had ever been. This wasn't just an argument. It was a complete unraveling. And maybe that unraveling had begun a long time before either of them noticed. In the weeks that followed, Ethan kept his distance. He rented a small apartment, a quiet place where he could clear his head, try to understand where things had gone wrong. Those first few nights were sleepless. He barely touched food. His mind replayed their best and worst moments, wondering if a different choice might have led them somewhere else. Camille, meanwhile, was swept up in an emotional tide. Grief came first, then guilt, heavy and suffocating. She combed through every conversation, every decision, trying to pinpoint where the fracture began. She wanted to call him, to fix what had broken, but the fear that it truly was broken kept her still. Worse than the silence was the gnawing dread that nothing she said could change anything anymore. She waited in silence, clinging to a fragile sense of hope, watching for even the faintest sign from him that things might still be salvaged. But no sign ever appeared. Around 4 weeks later, the divorce papers arrived. She wasn't caught off guard. Deep down, she had known this moment would come. Still, the physical presence of the documents made it undeniable. The end had arrived, and it was now tangible in her hands. There was no accompanying message, no personal words from Ethan, only the cold detachment of legal forms. It felt impersonal, almost procedural, though Camille recognized it wasn't a deliberate cruelty. It reflected what their marriage had gradually become, depleted, exhausted, and too brittle to endure further strain. Ethan added his signature days later, pausing before he did, not because he questioned the decision, but because he understood that signing meant closing a chapter that had once held so much promise. With quiet composure, he wrote his name, then carefully aligned the papers and handed them over to the attorney. As he walked out of the building, a muted blend of melancholy and release washed over him. This was the end of a journey that had begun with affection and shared dreams, but had slowly revealed that love, by itself, isn't always enough to keep two people together. He didn't blame Camille, nor did he fault himself. He simply recognized that they had both reached the moment when moving on was the only path left. That night, when Camille received word that the divorce had been finalized, the tears came once again. But this time, they weren't fueled by the sharp sting of heartbreak. They were quieter, gentler, the tears of someone who had begun to accept the truth. It was a more settled kind of pain, the kind that arises when you finally understand that love alone can't make someone stay. She placed the papers in a drawer, not to forget what they represented, but to keep them as a silent marker, a symbol of the painful wisdom found in learning how to let go. And so, as their paths slowly parted, Camille and Ethan stepped into separate futures, beginning the slow and uncertain work of starting over. This story has come to an end. What's your opinion? Share it in the comments, my friend. And if you like this story, check out other exciting videos on my channel. I'll say goodbye until the next video. See you.